Warm afternoon sunlight streamed through the tidy farmhouse window, dust motes drifting in the golden beams before it fell onto a pony-shaped lump beneath the quilts. The embroidered bed sheets rose and fell gently, with the muffled snores of its bed's occupant, slowly drifting as the sun sank in the fall sky. Outside, a blind-maned mare, whose coat matched the brilliant orange of the orchard's fall finery, adjusted her hat as she cast a proud eye over the last of the fall harvest. It had been a great harvest for the Apple family this year, and Applejack couldn't help but smile at that result. After all the problems of last year's harvest, she had had a long chat with Big Macintosh and Granny Smith, and they had come up with a plan. Bits were still a tough tight around the farm, and hiring more help would have cut deep into their slim profit margins. But the Grandame had a better idea. All it had taken was a few well-placed suggestions at the Spring's Apple family reunion, and all was set. Several of the younger cousins, who hadn't managed to find or start places of their own yet, had volunteered to come for a visit and lend a helping hoof this fall in exchange for some practical experience. It certainly didn't hurt that Applejack knew several other ponies in the area who would be harvesting other crops this fall, and wasn't shy about putting in the good word with her neighbors. All in all, it had worked out pretty darn well, as far as Applejack figured. Her cousins got a bit of work and made some good references, and the harvest that had taken her 2 weeks of mind-numbing exhaustion was accomplished in 3 days of hard work. As she looked out over the blessed empty orchards, a pair of ponies coming out of the west hills caught Applejack's eye, and her smile widened at the sight. Big Macintosh's red coat was a perfect match for the apples crowding in the bushel baskets on either side of his working harness, but her dependable workhorse of a brother wasn't what brought the smile to Applejack's face. Beside him, a little yellow filly was gamingly trotting to keep up with Macintosh's strides, smiling up at him cheerfully as she balanced her own small baskets of apples on her back. Apple Bloom was so proud that she could help with the harvest this year. The creak of a screen door behind her turned the farm pony's attention away from her siblings, but her smile widened a bit more at the pony who was slowly but surely crossing the porch.
Ooh-wee, heck of a nice day, ain't it, Granny Smith?
Sure-ee, Sugar Cube.
The old green mare settled herself in the battered and weathered rocking chair, closing her eyes in pleasure as the sun warmed her faded coat.
Good day to soak up a bit of sunshine for winter comes and it gets too chilly for my bones out here.
Applejack settled herself comfortably on the porch by her granny's hooves, and the two chatted about the day's work as they watched the two other siblings head into the barn. As they got closer, Apple Bloom's cheerful chatter and her brother's deep, calm responses joined their conversation in the wind. It brought a tear to the old mare's eye, and she smiled down at her Stetson-wearing grandfilly.
Sounds just like another filly I used to know, don't it?
Granny Smith's words were teasing, and she chuckled as Applejack blushed.
It does my heart a world of good to see you three taking such good care of this place and of each other.
Applejack laughed along with her grandame, still blushing a bit to remember her own first applebuck season.
That's what apples do, ain't it? We take care of what needs to be taken care of.
Suppose that explains why you're out here and there's still snoring coming from your room, eh?
Granny Smith waved a hoof as a wide-eyed Applejack started to stammer out an explanation.
I'm just pulling your leg, dearie. Apple Bloom told me about your friend's little accident last night, and you know I ain't one to begrudge any pony's hospitality.
The younger Apple shook her head and let out a breath, pulling herself together.
Your sense of humor is gonna send me into conniptions yet, Granny. Rainbow Dash is gonna stay with us for a spell. Leastways till the doctor clears her to fly.
Oh my, was she hurt that bad?
Concern was obvious on Granny Smith's face. Her joke forgotten, Applejack was quick to reassure her.
Nah, it's just a sprain. But I didn't want Dash hurting herself worse being too dang stubborn to rest and let it heal.
She grinned, a bit ruefully.
What with me being an expert at being stubborn and all.
Just like your daddy, it only comes naturally to us apples, stubborn and patient as the trees were named for.
The old green mare rocked in her chair, thinking.
The boys lit out this morning for the Pie's place. Said they'd drop back by to press cider in a couple weeks before they headed out back to Appaloosa. So weave the space and you just tell her she's welcome.
I sure will, Granny.
Applejack climbed back on her hooves, eyeing the way the sun stood close to the western treetops.
Well, it's getting late in the afternoon. I think I'll go see if Rainbow's up and around yet. Don't want her to get stuck in bed. She's too sore to get to the painkillers.
You just go do that, dear, and I'll get started on some dinner here after a while.
Watching her Grand Filly head into the house, Granny Smith settled back into her chair with a content murmur. As the screen door banged closed behind Applejack, her grandame rocked comfortably in her rocking chair, a slow grin spreading on her face. Her grandfoals were the light of her life, and it gave her no end of amusement, watching the patterns of the past play out again in them, especially when it came to trying to keep secrets. It hadn't passed Granny Smith's notice that of all of Applejack's friends, Rainbow Dash was the one she heard the most about. The orange earth pony was always off-hoofedly mentioning some contest or other she'd gotten into with her Pegasus friend, and her sudden keen interest in the weather schedule had not surprised the old mare, nor had she missed how often a certain tree out on the hill tended to pick up a colorful tendon right about the same time her Grand Filly was usually out taking her afternoon stroll to check on the orchards. The old green mare smiled to herself as she rocked in the warm sun. This would make a good chance to get a measure of this Rainbow Dash. She'd known Macintosh was walking out with the shy little Pegasus friend of Applejack's for a couple weeks now. Although the stallion had been careful not to mention it anywhere, he hadn't figured on the way gossip flew in the social circles of Ponyville. After all, old mares love nothing more than the gossip, and Granny Smith had long established herself as the great dame of the baking circle. She was content to hold her peace, though, and had not pressed him as to why he was suddenly so willing to run the family's apple stand in the afternoons. After all, there was no rush. They'd tell her when they felt the time was right, and in the meantime, the matriarch of the Apple clan would do what she always did best: help the good things in the world to grow. Applejack was careful not to make too much noise as she climbed the stairs towards her room. If Rainbow Dash was still asleep, she was inclined to let the sore Pegasus sleep herself out. When she opened the door to her room with a careful hoof, the sight in front of her brought a smile to her lips. The afternoon sun had apparently gotten on the nerves of the bed's occupant, and she had moved to keep it out of her eyes. Beyond this point, all that was visible beneath the old quilt was a splash of rainbow-striped mane against the pillow, which had now migrated to the foot of the bed. The tip of a cyan ear poking out of messy hair was the only other visible sight that there was an actual pony somewhere underneath the rumpled blanket. Taking a few steps across the room, Applejack busied herself for a moment, pulling the curtains to block out the worst of the afternoon sun, before turning back to the bed as the sheets rustled. A moment later, the quilt shifted, and Rainbow Dash blinked sleepily rosy eyes up at the orange earth pony. Dash yawned, her nose crinkling delicately, before looking back at Applejack. "Morning." Applejack chuckled, folding her forelegs on the bed to put herself at the other pony's eye level.
More like afternoon, Sugar Cube. You slept straight through the day.
Rainbow Dash blinked once more.
You should have gotten me up.
Her voice was still a bit rough from sleep, but carried a bit of annoyance at being left to snooze. When Dash moved out to climb out from beneath the quilt, annoyance faded with a wince, as the muscles on her back and her wing gave her a sharp reminder of just why she was sleeping in the bed, instead of on her usual clouds. Applejack helped the Pegasus untangle herself from the blankets, careful not to let the cloth catch on the bandages wrapping Dash's right wing, and holding it against her side.
Nah, you needed to sleep. You were out on your hooves all night at the clinic. Ended up carrying you halfway here once the drugs kicked in, so I figured it'd be best to let you sleep it off.
Wincing again as she pushed herself to sit on the bed, Dash hung her head at the mention of being carried.
Yeah, that stuff always hits me like a brick. Sorry you got stuck hauling me around, AJ. Not like you weighed anything to speak of, Sugar. Compared to what I'm usually hauling around Applebuck season, one pretty little Pegasus ain't nothing.
Leaning in, the orange mare pulled Rainbow Dash into a careful hug.
Besides, you'd do the same thing for me, and you know it. Well, yeah, of course I would, but...
Dash broke off her doubtful words as Applejack laid a gentle hoof on her lips. "But nothing. I'm just glad to have you here with me, in one piece after yesterday." The rainbow-maned Pegasus nodded, remembering all too well her own fear and panic. Applejack's voice hadn't let any fear show, as she kept up a steady stream of reassuring optimistic chatter to distract Dash from the pain of her injured wing on the way to the clinic.
You and me both. I was dead sure I'd busted something until the doctor gave me the good news. Sprains take a while to heal, but at least I'll get back to the air in a couple weeks instead of a month.
She shivered at the thought.
If not longer. Wing bones don't always heal well.
With an effort, Dash forced a weak version of her usual cocky smile onto her face.
But I'll be up and around in no time flat.
You best do what the doc told you and take it easy. Or so help me, I'll truss you up like a little blue bale of hay till you're healed up, Applejack replied. Dash snickered at the image, despite herself, before flattening her ears as Applejack continued. Rainbow Dash, I'm being serious here. You just rest up and let that wing of yours heal. The orange-coated farmer's expression was serious, despite the humor in her eyes. Look at it this way, Sugar Cube. You remember the last time I got hurt, right?
Yeah, you hurt your foot bucking apples last year, right?
Applejack nodded, waving a forehoof in the Pegasus's direction. Yep, and just like you're about to, I didn't listen and just tried to walk it off. Rainbow Dash gave the Earth Pony a rebellious look, as she prepared to object, then sighed, and nodded slowly at Applejack's amused smile.
Yeah, it's just hard sitting around, you know. I'm used to going 100 miles an hour, all day, every day.
I know it's hard, Sugar Cube. About drove me up a wall having to watch Big Mac take care of all my usual chores. The farm pony grinned wryly. I think having me hovering around bugged him more than having to do all the work. But trying to get back into the saddle too soon just made it worse.
You were limping a little at Pinky's New Year's party, weren't you?
The Pegasus asked after a moment's thought.
I just figured you slipped on some ice or something on the way in.
With a rueful grin, Applejack shook her head. Nope, still that same hoof. I just kept going on it, until Fluttershy finally cornered me when she was out visiting. Gave me a lecture about taking better care of myself, and made me rest it for a while. Rolling her eyes, she chuckled with remembered embarrassment. Like I should have in the first place. Big Mac may never let me live that down. Even then, it took till almost winter wrap-up to get my strength back. But me no buts. I promised I see you took care of yourself, and I aim to keep that promise. You wouldn't want to make a liar out of me, would you? Applejack turned a smile on her friend, but was a little startled when the usual fiery reply didn't come. The cyan Pegasus's bangs were in her eyes as she hung her head.
Of course not, AJ. I'm just...
Rainbow Dash trailed off, trying to figure out how to put what she was feeling into words. Applejack kept a smile on her face, despite a little worry at seeing her mare friend look so lost. Ah, horse feathers. You're gonna be fine, Dash. It's just gonna take a little time. Anyway, I talked to Granny Smith a bit ago, and you're more than welcome to stay here till you heal up. Applejack grinned as she switched into a more cheerful topic, determined to keep Dash from dwelling on what it could have been. If you want to, of course. Now that the apples are booked, we got a couple weeks till cider season. Then it will be a quiet month or so before the winter market goes into swing.
Well, if I'm not in the way...
A pony that was usually fiercely independent, Rainbow Dash was always uncomfortable having to rely on others. She never had been one to stay where she wasn't wanted. Shucks, Rainbow. I'd be mighty glad of the company. Oh, Twilight stopped by this morning to pass on her best, and to let you know the Cloud Kicker's coming down from Canterlot to shore up the weather ponies here. Applejack chuckled. So you don't have to worry about the weather. From the way Twi was talking, it seemed like Princess Celestia was sending her down here to prove a point. The cyan Pegasus perked up at the news, sounding much more like herself.
That's priceless! I went to flight school with Cloud Kicker. She was always totally sure that the little farm towns like Ponyville were always putting old Pegasi out to pasture.
Drawing herself up, Dash affected an overblown Canterlot accent.
No interesting weather ever happens out in the sticks after all.
Shaking her head, she chuckled.
Let's hear her say that after the first winter storms roll off the Everfree Forest. Well then, sounds like this accident ain't gonna turn out all bad after all. You get a little much-deserved time to heal up. Cloudkicker gets to learn a little lesson.
Applejack glanced at the open door, just to be sure that they were alone, and leaned in to kiss Rainbow Dash softly. After a long moment, she pulled away with a smile and a blush.
And I get to spend my favorite time of year with my favorite pony.
An equally blushing Rainbow Dash smiled back.
Suddenly being grounded isn't so bad.